Our story started with three young kindred trying to survive in the ruins of Warsaw, only 2 years after the end of the Second World War. Janina, a bruja striving to hold on to her ideals and still not quite comfortable with the idea of assaulting people to feed on their blood. Mara, a Nosferatu and a former actress who tried to embrace being a monster, but had too good a heart and missed the admiration of an audience too much. And Bea, a Malkavian, who was the most well-adjusted of them all, at least when it came to kindred existence, but struggled with memory issues and had no idea who she was before her embrace. Separated from the kindred society, unsure how much of it has survived, they were accompanied by Bea's sire, Felicia, an elderly woman by appearance who strove to raise her 3 neonates as good kindred with proper manners. They were also accompanied by Roman, a resourceful Nosferatu, who became a friend to the whole coterie. They made their haven in a basement of a damaged building in a district of Praga on the eastern bank of the Vistula River, looking for any signs of kindred society, and of Estera, a bruja friend of Felicia, with whom she lost touch. The story began in 1947, just after the autumn equinox. An unquiet night, marked by Sabbat celebrations, the echoes of which came to the coterie in the form of distant screams in the night, as well as visions troubling Bea and her sire. These visions had a strong impact on Felicia, who was unwell when she woke up. It was up to the 3 young neonates to assess the situation in their district. In the ruins of St. Florian's Cathedral, they found the remains of the Sabbat celebrations. Bea was able to reconstruct the disturbing events led by a man in a black priest's robe. Violence, fire, and people digging themselves from under the ground. In the ruins of the cathedral, they encountered another person observing the scene. Rahela, a Malkavian in the form of a child, who informed the coterie that the Camarilla has survived. She provided them with a phone number they could use to get in touch with its representatives. On the way back, Bea, skilled in reading omens, discerned that her sire Felicia was in danger, and not waiting for the coterie, ran back to the haven and upon not finding her sire there, further into the night, frantic and desperate to locate her. Janina and Mara were left behind and encountered 2 members of the Sabbat who have been observing them, the man in the priest's robe and a Nosferatu with a dislocated jaw. They warned the coterie that those who refuse the call of their blood will not be tolerated on the hallowed ground that is Warsaw. But for now, they let them go. Mara and Janina returned to their haven, only to find that Bea was missing. Mara set out to look for Bea and eventually found her. Meanwhile, Janina waited at the ruins of the theatre where Mara used to perform. There, she met Mara's sire, who left his child when she rejected him after the embrace, but continued to watch her from the distance. Reunited coterie finally found a note left by Felicia, informing them that she left with Roman to meet with another survivor from the Camarilla at the Powązki cemetery. But Bea continued to sense her sire was in danger. The coterie set out to find Felicia and Roman, crossing the river, and for the first time truly witnessing the destruction of the city, some of which has been bombed completely to the ground. At the cemetery, they didn't find Felicia, but saw signs of a fight. Examining the scene, Bea learned that the Tremere her sire hoped to meet was killed by 2 unknown women, one of whom hurt Felicia, and was still at the cemetery to mock the coterie before disappearing. Knowing that Felicia survived, the coterie returned to their haven to wait for her and Roman. Janina grew closer with the coterie's mortal neighbor Halina, whose husband was one of the Sabbat's victims, and whose teenage son Pavel was acting careless out of anger and grief. Later, the coterie was attacked by 2 fresh Sabbat vampires. After one of them ran away, the coterie was left with the other. Marta, embraced on the night of the Equinox, traumatized by her experiences, which included a diablerie, and forced by Sabbat to engage in violence. The coterie decided to take care of Marta and help her live as a kindred. They began informing her on her condition and bonding with her. The next night, Felicia and Roman returned, severely wounded but safe. Both insisted that the coterie should get in touch with the Camarilla immediately. Marta was introduced to Felicia, in hope that she would receive instruction and care. But Felicia deemed that since Marta was a diablerist, she couldn't be introduced to the Camarilla, as it would decrease the credibility of the whole group, particularly Mara and Janina, whose sires were absent. Felicia persuaded Bea to leave Marta in torpor for the sun. Bea listened to her sire, and with no guilt to trouble her, wrote down in her diary that Marta ran away, hoping to believe it once her memory fades, and to make Mara and Janina believe it as well. They indeed believed it, and they tried to find Marta, but in vain. The next night, Bea's reading of Omens indicated that Marta was dead, so the search was stopped. The coterie made contact with the Camarilla and set out for their meeting with its representatives, leaving Felicia and Roman behind for now, since Felicia was still too severely wounded. She urged the coterie to ask about her Bruja friend Estera. They were greeted by the sheriff of the city, a toreador, Lucian Topolski, and 2 of his hounds, Clemens, a Nosferatu, and Antoni, a Ventru. After a conversation, during which the coterie explained who they were taken to Hotel Bristol, a building that survived the war almost entirely undamaged, and currently housed the Camarilla kindred. At Hotel Bristol, the coterie was introduced to the Prince of Warsaw, Katarzyna Chodkiewicz of Clan Ventru, and accepted into the Camarilla society. They spent some time at the Elysium, getting to know various kindred. Janina met Zygmunt Ray, the Bruja Primogen, who took interest in her well-being and offered to answer any of her questions. The coterie once again met the Malkavian Rahela and her sire Bruno, a broodmate of Felicia, and a very skilled pianist who usually played at the Elysium, composing painfully sad music. Bea met Cornelia of Clan Ventru, the sire of the leader of Bea's former coterie, who died betrayed by one of its members, Arek, a gangrel who have now joined the Sabbat. But not everything went smoothly. They didn't find Felicia's friend Estera. Mara and Janina managed to antagonize the toreador Primogen by first attracting his attention through wearing somewhat outrageous theater costumes, and then through making comments about him within earshot. The coterie received its room at Hotel Bristol and were driven back to their haven to return with Felicia and Roman the next night. Janina tried to help her mortal neighbor by asking around about her teenage son who, struggling to cope with the violent death of his father, went out drinking and acted carelessly. Then the coterie headed back to Hotel Bristol with Felicia and Roman. At Elysium, they learned that some kindred recently went missing, mostly Nosferatu, but also a young toreador. Janina spoke some more to the venture hound Antoni, who expressed that he appreciated her involvement with resistance during the war, before her embrace. However, she was also publicly humiliated by Toreador Primogen, who forced her to kneel in front of him and showed her that he could do to her whatever he wanted. Mara met her Primogen and didn't make a good impression on her, which left her feeling like she was embraced into a wrong clan. The coterie also received their first task: to investigate a possible masquerade breach at a clinic near Praga district, where some inquiries have been made about symptoms resembling kindred condition. Since Roman stayed with his sire, the Nosferatu Primogen, and Felicia was tasked with a job by the prince, the coterie returned to their haven alone. There, they found mutilated bodies of their mortal neighbor Halina and her daughter, and a "wish you were here" message left by the Sabbat in their bloodied and destroyed haven. The son of the murdered neighbor, Pavel, was also there, drunk, curled up on the floor and crying. Wanting to keep Pavel safe, Janina gave him some of her vita, feeling a lot of conflicting emotions about it. The coterie slept in their devastated haven and cleaned it up the next night. Bea got lost in the visions of the coming darkness. Janina, feeling desperate to feed, decided to drink from Pavel, but she lost control. Mara eventually managed to get her off the man they hoped to save, but it was too late. He died, leaving Janina with guilt and disgust with herself. In somber mood, the coterie returned to Hotel Bristol to report what happened to the Camarilla and to Bea's sire. Given the shortage of housing in the ruined city, the coterie had to stay at Hotel Bristol for a while. Janina confided in her Primogen about her difficulties in adjusting to life as a kindred, and her guilt over killing Pavel. He emphasized to her the importance of remembering what it was like to be human, and of feeling guilt. Felicia, worried about Mara not adjusting, suggested to her that she should get in touch with Dominik Savitsky, a Nosferatu living at Hotel Bristol, who used to be a famous ballet dancer. The coterie set out towards the clinic where the supposed masquerade breach took place to fulfill their task. Bea and Janina identified one of the two nurses working at the clinic as the person who had been making inquiries about symptoms resembling kindred condition. Mara followed her home to learn more about her, while the others stayed at the clinic a bit longer to maintain their cover. There, Janina spotted a familiar face, Sarah, her friend and crush from her mortal life. Mara identified the house of the nurse and learned that there were several people living there. The whole coterie returned there the following night. They were invited inside by a man called Leonard, who, as they later learned, was a Malkavian and a child of Bruno. The conversation with the group revealed that one of Leonard's friends, Oleg, accidentally tasted his blood and became his ghoul, while others knew quite a lot about Leonard's condition, although they thought he was sick. The group didn't like the implication that they'd have to submit to the kindred society, but Bea and Mara managed to persuade Leonard to trust them and consider coming with them to be introduced to the Camarilla tomorrow. Leonard also revealed to them a lot about his disturbing visions, indicating the dead awoken by the bombs during the war, and the darkness reaching for a visionary. Back at the Elysium, Rahela introduced Mara and Janina to Dominik, the Nosferatu ballet dancer, who turned out to share desire with Mara. They also met his friend, a young toreador called Diana, a violin player and the child of the sheriff. Mara danced with Dominic to Diana's music, while Janina marveled at her, happy to see her friend and crush in her element. Bea spoke to her sire about everything that happened. Felicia was very proud of her child and shared that Bruno advised her not to search for her lost friend Estera. From Rahela, Mara and Janina learned that Bruno sired many children during the war, and that while Rahela's life was spared, most of them were executed. This made them hesitant to inform the Camarilla about Leonard and his mortal friends, but Bea had no such doubts. In the end, the coterie persuaded Leonard and his ghoul to come to meet with the Camarilla, but their friends went into hiding before the coterie arrived and were nowhere to be found. The coterie took Leonard to Hotel Bristol. They confronted Bruno about the many children he sired and learned that he tried to save them through embracing them. Leonard was presented to the prince, but he outright refused to cooperate in locating his mortal friends. He remained defiant and was saved only by Mara, who begged the prince to spare him, and took it upon herself to resolve the issue of Leonard's friends and their knowledge about the kindred. Leonard was put in the care of venture hound Antony, who offered to teach him the ways and laws of the Camarilla. The coterie spoke to their Nosferatu friend Roman, who told them that he was trying to find out what happened to the Nosferatu who recently went missing. Janina spoke more to her Primogen, who gave her his essay to help her further explore the issues of staying human. From it she learned about how kindred change as they become less human, and that this process could be reversed. The essay was accompanied by notes made by Primogen's missing child, who called out his sire for befriending inhuman monsters and rationalizing existence as kindred, which to him was morally indefensible. Bea spoke to the venture Cornelia and received an invitation for her coterie to come speak to the venture Primogen. She also confided in her sire about Janina not adjusting well to the Camarilla. They agreed that hopefully Janina could be steered in the right direction. At the end of the night, Mara went to speak to Dominic about their sire, and connected with him over the shared trauma of having their former lives destroyed through their sire's obsession. She learned that Dominic wasn't interested in revenge, since he didn't care about his sire anymore, having found a new meaning to his existence in his art and in his love for the Warsaw sheriff. Dominic expressed a belief that Mara will also find a new meaning, and offered to support her on this journey. The next night, Bea rose exhausted from the nightmares that have been occasionally tormenting her since her embrace. She went out to clear her head, but was followed by Mara, who wanted to make sure that she was okay. Mara learned that while Bea forgets a lot of things, she remembers her. Janina tried to ask Felicia about Bea's past, but Felicia told her that she should accept Bea as she was right now. Janina was a bit jealous of Felicia's care for Bea, but she still felt uneasy about how dedicated Bea was to her sire. Mara was informed that her sire had been found and was being brought to Hotel Bristol. Wanting to confront him, she decided to stay behind, while Janina and Bea left for their meeting with the venture Primogen. She saw her sire accompanying the Toreador Primogen and acting subservient to him. She had to face the fact that the man who ruined her life was not a powerful monster she imagined, but just a regular kindred. After a feeding mishap, Janina gave some of her vita to her victim, an older woman, in order to save her life. Later, she and Bea met the venture Primogen, who offered them an opportunity to work for him. He proposed a task involving investigating a suspected Sabbat haven to learn what could be learned about the enemies of the Camarilla. a task that the coterie accepted. Janina went back to the clinic where the masquerade breach was first identified and spoke to her former crush Sarah about locating the nurse who used to live with the Malkavian Leonard. She rose some suspicions, but managed to convince Sarah to arrange a meeting with the nurse and left Sarah a phone number for Hotel Bristol. Roman warned Mara that there was a new, dangerous hunter in the city, likely responsible for the disappearance of the missing Nosferatu. He also revealed that he learned that Felicia, with Bea's help, killed Marta, the young kindred the coterie rescued from the Sabbat. Janina talked to Deepening about being gay and learned that in kindred society nobody cared about your sexual orientation. Then she revealed to Deepening that she was in love with Mara. When Mara and Janina reunited, Mara shared the news about what happened to the woman they rescued. They talked about their frustration and anger with the Camarilla and worried that they couldn't trust Bea because of the influence her sire had over her. Bea was spending time with her sire, helping her locate the Malkavian Primogen. They found the Primogen clearing rubble with mortal workers, but after winking at Bea, they disappeared. When walking through the ruined Warsaw Old Town, Bea sensed a terrifying figure with pale eyes, watching her and Felicia. When the coterie reunited, Janina tried to talk to Bea about humanity and implied that Bea was further away from being human. Bea also picked up on Mara being distrustful of her and confided in her sire about Mara and Janina acting strange. The coterie talked to the Ventru Cornelia about the details of their task. They were offered weapons and vita before setting out, but Mara made silly jokes, and Janina lost control when feeding from Cornelia's ghoul, almost killing him. Still angry with the Camarilla, Janina stormed off without apologizing, outraged about being told off by Cornelia for not controlling herself. Bea was upset and angry with her coterie for their behavior and for not treating their task and dangers involved seriously. With tensions running high between them, the coterie set out to investigate the Sabbat haven at the ruined Holy Trinity Church. They tried to carefully scout out the area, but in the process, despite being told not to, Mara went inside the church to see more. She was attacked and quickly overpowered. Hearing her scream, Janina rushed inside without thinking. Bea followed more carefully, but the coterie was eventually overpowered by the Sabbat members, including a gangrel Arek, who betrayed Bea's first coterie, and Estera, Felicia's missing friend. The coterie were all asked if they would join the Sabbat by the priest who once confronted them near their now destroyed haven. They all refused and were tortured, together with a young woman they didn't know. Janina was left, locked in the crypt with the unknown woman, but before they got a chance to speak, Janina frenzied from hunger and diablerized her. Mara was taken to be tormented by the Sabbat some more. Bea spoke to Estera, who asked her about Felicia and offered to release her to take a message to her sire and arrange a meeting between them. But before Estera could let Bea out, they were intercepted by other Sabbat members, who locked Bea back in the crypt. The coterie was eventually rescued by Anarchs, led by Isidore, the child of the Bruja Primogen, who came to save the fourth captive. The group included Janina's sire, Daniel. From him they learned that the woman diablerized by Janina was Daniel's other child, embraced after he and Janina got separated. The coterie was taken to Anarch's hideout to recover. They revealed that they worked for the Ventru Primogen and expressed a worry that having committed diablerie, Janina could not go back to Hotel Bristol. The coterie was offered a space to rest and feed, although not all Anarchs were happy about them being brought to their hideout. The Anarchs warned that Sabbat was observing and attacking them, but has not made a full assault yet. Some in the group thought they should contact Camarilla and rejoin it, while others resented this idea. Janina reconnected with her sire, who was happy to see her alive, but struggled with the diablerie of his other child. Mara befriended Oscar, a Malkavian Anarch and another child of Bruno. Both Janina and Mara felt more comfortable with Anarchs than with the Camarilla, and began to seriously consider staying with them. Janina shared with Bea a worry that Felicia would never understand nor forgive her for the diablerie. Through the effort of will, Bea remembered how Felicia told her to kill Marta due to her being a diablerist. She became very worried for Janina's fate if she was to come back to Hotel Bristol. Dutiful as ever, Bea went back to the hotel to report, taking with her Isidore, who went to negotiate with the Camarilla. Mara and Janina stayed with the Anarchs. They were told Sabbat was watching the area through servant rats. But, desperate to help Anarchs somehow, they decided to take a gamble and contact Rat's master in the hope of finding an ally against the Sabbat. The gamble didn't pay off. When asking the animal to meet its master, Mara saw in its mind an image of someone they briefly saw when they were being held captive by the Sabbat. An inhuman-looking man in a jacket made out of dried flesh. Shaken and dispirited, they didn't pay much attention to whether they were being followed. They admitted what they did to the Anarchs, who became angry and alarmed, especially the Bruja Zoya, who appeared to be in charge in Isidore's absence. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the Malkavian Primogen, who told Mara and Janina to go take care of Felicia, who was attacked and injured, while looking for them. Mara talked back without much respect. Before they left to get Felicia, Zoya told Mara and Janina off for being careless and needlessly provoking the Primogen, who could have killed them all. Mara and Janina located injured and distressed Felicia and brought her back to the Anarch hideout. She was very unwell and only barely aware of her surroundings. Meanwhile, Bea and Isidore arrived at Hotel Bristol. Bea reported to the Ventru Primogen and was assured that Janina would be welcome back to the Camarilla, despite the diablerie she committed, since it was an accident that happened while she was working for the Primogen. The Primogen expressed a desire to also receive a report from Janina and Mara. Bea went back to the Anarch hideout to fetch them. When the coterie reunited, Bea took care of her sire, while the other two were taken outside by Zoya, who explained to them that if they wanted to stay with the Anarchs, they would have to stop being so reckless. The Anarchs were thinking of changing their haven, but they didn't leave in time. Early the next night, the Malkavians started sensing a coming danger, and everyone heard the howling of dogs. There were two attackers, the man in the jacket made out of dried flesh, and the woman whom the coterie encountered a while ago at the cemetery. They were accompanied by large, disfigured dogs. Zoya shouted for everyone to run, but Oscar was hit and too injured to move. Felicia ordered Bea to run away with her, and Bea, unable to resist the blood bond, followed, abandoning her coterie. They got out and returned to Hotel Bristol. Mara didn't even try running, trying to help Oscar and other Anarchs. But she was the one who invited the Zimishi to this place, and he came for her. As he tore into her flesh, she shouted for Janina to run. Then she got lost in the pleasure of the kiss, as the man drained her vita and then her soul. She died, hoping Janina would be safe. Janina was ready to attack the Zimishi, but she was stopped by her sire Daniel, who fought her to restrain her and save her. She watched Mara crumble into dust and felt absolutely broken as she lost the woman she loved. Janina and Bea reunited, devastated by the knowledge that Mara was gone. They returned to Hotel Bristol, taking with them Daniel, who once inside was collected by the Bruja Primogen, to talk about his return to the Camarilla. Before walking away, Daniel expressed that he was glad that Janina lived. Janina struggled to see a purpose in her existence after Mara's death, but said that as long as Daniel and Bea were around, she would try to continue. The coterie tried to process their grief. Bea expressed anger at her sire for making her run away and not letting her help Mara. Felicia numbed some of Bea's grief, explaining that Bea was always the dearest to her, and not understanding why Mara and Janina didn't run away as well. Once the numbness ended, Bea wanted to stay with Janina, but Felicia told her to go back to their room for the day. Next night, Bea woke up trapped in a nightmare. She ran out of the hotel in panic and crawled deep into the sewers. There she felt a presence observing her, a figure with pale eyes. She ran away and managed to climb out of the sewers, and she was found by the Malkavian Primogen, who offered her some of their vita. They said that Bea came very close to danger, but the person she saw shouldn't be a problem unless Bea went looking for him. They also suggested that letting her past slip away didn't have to be a bad thing, as Bea could always decide to become someone new. Terrified, Janina searched for Bea. She ran into a woman to whom she gave some vita earlier after a feeding mishap. Janina told the woman that she could contact her at Hotel Bristol. Next, Janina ran into coterie's Nosferatu friend Roman, who learned from rats that Bea went into the sewers and walked towards a dangerous hunter. He was angry and terrified by the news, but he wouldn't let Janina follow Bea, not wanting to lose her as well. Bea and Janina reunited at Hotel Bristol. Bea reported some of what she learned about the dangerous presence in the sewers. Janina spoke to the vengeful hound Antoni and promised to take care of a masquerade breach involving friends of the Malkavian Leonard, since Mara died before performing the task. Janina was also introduced by her Primogen to a recently found young Bruja called Nastia. At Elysium, Bea's nightmares returned, making her cause a bit of a scene. Janina and Felicia took care of her, but the nightmares did not go away the next night. The coterie had to postpone their meeting with the vengeful Primogen. Bea spent the night being taken care of by her sire and Janina. The sheriff told Janina that her diablerie was forgiven on the request from both Bruja and vengeful Primogens, but that repeating such a deed would not be tolerated. She also talked to her sire Daniel, who told her that he didn't mention to Isidore, the leader of the Anarchs, Janina's involvement in bringing Kazimishi to their haven. Bea's nightmares ended the next night. At this point she realized that Felicia has torn a page out of the notebook that Bea uses to manage her memory problems. She confronted her sire with Janina, but Felicia explained that she did it because Bea started writing down nightmares and she didn't want her child to relive them. The coterie met with the vengeful Primogen to report on everything that happened. They were offered his patronage and vita, which Bea accepted, but Janina didn't. Primogen asked Bea to perform another task for him, set up a meeting between her sire and her friend Estera, who has joined the Sabbat, so that Estera could be killed or captured. For performing their task well, the coterie received their own haven, but for now returned to Hotel Bristol. Seeing Isidore anxious about other Anarchs, Bea used her supernatural insight to learn the approximate location of two of them. But she also discovered that the third missing one was dead. Janina revealed to Isidore that she was responsible for bringing Ezimishi to the Anarch haven. Barely able to control his anger, he told her to stay away, and took Daniel to find Zoya. Janina set out on her own to find the Malkavian Oscar. Bea tried to talk to Felicia about the meeting with Estera and her task for the Venture Primogen, but the conversation sent Felicia into a catatonic state. Unable to resist her blood bond, Bea chose to stay with her sire and didn't go with Janina. Janina got lost on her way to find Oscar but pushed on, unsure where she was going. She was attacked by a Sabbat Nosferatu with a dislocated jaw, who beat her almost into torpor and buried her deep in a grave. Feeling like she did not want to exist anymore, Janina didn't struggle much. She was rescued the following night by Nastya, a bruja she was recently introduced to, who secretly followed her out of concern. Janina revealed some of her feelings to Nastya, who tried to convince her to take better care of herself. Bea managed to get her sire out of the catatonic state, but was very concerned for Janina, who didn't return before dawn. She went to search for her with Felicia and Roman, who expressed his exasperation with how careless the coterie was all the time. They found Janina and Nastya and brought them back to Hotel Bristol. Daniel and Isidore found Zoya, but returned severely wounded, having been attacked by the woman who accompanied the Zimishi in the attack on the Anarch haven. Following her sire's suggestion to be able to take better care of Janina, Bea fed her some of her own vita. The sheriff spoke to Bea about her meeting with the Malkavian Primogen, but she could see that he didn't quite believe the information she learned that night, nor that the meeting even took place. The following night, Antoni, the Venture Hound, gave the coterie information regarding possible location of Leonard's friends. After investigating, Janina and Bea confirmed that the mortals were determined to find Leonard. Janina tried to feed but lost control. Bea managed to get her off her victim, but Janina got a second sip of her vita in the process. The coterie reported back to Antoni, who explained that some of Leonard's friends likely were with him for too long to reliably wipe their memory. He said they would probably have to be given vita or be killed. The coterie spoke to Leonard, who just wanted his friends to be left alone, but he thought it was too late. Janina secretly let him know that she would try to help them. Bea made preparations for Felicia's meeting with Estera, playing on her sire's hope that the Estera might be brought back into the Camarilla. Bea, Felicia and Janina went to set up the meeting, but before they left, Janina spotted Sarah, her former crush, and a connection to Leonard's friends, at the Hotel Bristol, looking for her. They spoke and arranged to meet up and talk at the church near Sarah's clinic early the following night. Bea and Felicia overheard the conversation. The following night, Janina left early for her meeting with Sarah. Bea was worried about her and, with some convincing from Felicia, decided to let Antoni know about the meeting. Then she went with her sire to meet Estera. On the way, Felicia asked her to help keep Estera safe and bring her back to the Camarilla, and Bea lied that she would. Janina met with Sarah and Leonard's friends, and eventually revealed to them the truth about Kindred, trying to convince them to run away. They agreed, but before they left, Antoni arrived at the church. In panic, Janina quickly attacked him, causing a confrontation that left most of the mortals dead. The only survivors were Sarah, who got her memory erased by Antoni, and the other nurse, who became his ghoul. Bea and Felicia spoke to Estera, who was glad to see her old friend, but didn't want to return to the Camarilla. She told Felicia that she found an important mission in the Sabbat, and warned her that the Camarilla in Warsaw would fall. Before the conversation ended, Estera was attacked by 2 Camarilla Nosferatu. In the fight that ensued, Felicia tried to help Estera, but she was stopped by Bea. Estera was diablerized by one of the Nosferatu, who frenzied. Janina arrived too late to help and could only console Bea, who was pushed away by Felicia. Janina also had to deal with her own guilt. She realized that Antoni also hoped to avoid killing, and had an honest conversation with him, admitting that she would always choose helping people over Camarilla. Both were summoned to speak to the prince, who thanked them for their work and asked if there were any problems. Antoni didn't reveal that Janina attacked him. Janina also spoke to the Bruja Primogen, who invited her to visit his workshop the following night. Felicia refused to speak to Bea. Bruno, Felicia's broodmate, took care of her and told Bea that her sire still cared for her, but she needed some time. Bea reported to the Venture Primogen, who was pleased with her and said that she could have a bright future in front of her. Janina visited the Bruja Primogen, who shared with her his ideas for building a more harmonious relationship between mortals and kindred on the foundations of the Camarilla. He gave Janina papers on recent research into transfusion of blood from fresh corpses and its storage in blood banks, asking her to look into the possibility of establishing such a blood bank in Warsaw. He said Nastia could help her with translating the papers. Daniel convinced Anarchs to accept Janina's help in rescuing the missing Malkavian Oscar, who, as Bea's insight suggested, was probably held captive. They agreed to search for him the next night. Janina also finally got in trouble with the sheriff for being careless when feeding and for directing mortals to Hotel Bristol to find her. Despite her protests, Daniel took the responsibility for it as her sire, and as a consequence was bloodbound to a Bruja hound Elka and told to assist her in her work. Bea got a vision of something dangerous and disturbing wrapping itself around Nastia. Bea and Janina then set out with Isidore and Zoya to search for Oscar in the far south of Warsaw. On the way, Bea's visions warned her of danger, but the group kept going and found a possible shelter for the day. In the shelter, Bea saw a vision of a woman in a red dress observing her. She forced herself to follow in the direction her senses warned her not to go. There, outside one villa, she heard a voice in her head, inviting her inside to talk about what she was looking for, and assuring her that she and her companions would be safe, like all guests of the Zimishi. Janina and Isidore entered with Bea, but Zoya left to tell Bruja Primogen what happened. Bea, Janina, and Isidore met with the woman in the red dress, who turned out to be the sire of the Zimishi who killed Mara. She revealed that Oscar was a guest at her place, and would be free to leave if he wished to. She also had a separate, telepathic conversation with Bea, taking interest in her and calling her lack of memory a blessing, allowing Bea to be free of what she was before. She also revealed that she could free Bea from her blood bond. Oscar, transformed into a grotesque sculpture, did not want to leave. Bea saw that he finally felt at peace and satisfied, free from anxiety and the need for attention that tormented him since his embrace. The man who killed Mara appeared, almost driving Janina into frenzy, but with Bea's help she was able to control herself. The coterie and Isidore left the house, traumatized by what they saw on the inside. On their way back to Hotel Bristol, they were intercepted by a man who introduced himself as Joachim Roffe, a Tremere. The coterie went to meet Joachim's sire Edwin and put his small group of kindred in touch with the Camarilla. Bea and Janina reported to the Venture Primogen what they learned on their escapade. Edwin was also present. The coterie was informed that they would receive another task the following night. At Hotel Bristol, Bea ran into Felicia, who was very polite to her and expressed a need for Bea's company, but Janina noticed that she also desired to hurt Bea. Bea talked to two other Malkavians, Rahela and Leonard, about a sense of danger and darkness in the hotel. She saw darkness twisting around Nastia and the Bruja Primogen, and tried to report some of what she saw to Antoni. He seemed dismissive, but eventually revealed that Camarilla was aware of some danger, but he couldn't say more. Bea also talked to the Ventru, Cornelia, about her former coterie, which was led by Cornelia's child. Through conversation and focus of will, she was able to recover some memories about him. Janina reconnected with the Nosferatu ballet dancer Dominic, who took interest in her growing friendship with Nastia. She spent a large part of the night with Nastia, first warning her of danger, and then studying with her the possibility of establishing a blood bank in Warsaw. Daniel was traumatized and exhausted by his work for Elka. He told Janina that Sabbat has been embracing new people. He and Elka killed some of them, but the conscience troubled him, since to him the Shovelheads were also victims. Bea and Janina received their task from Edwin, to accompany his child Joachim to what was left of the Tremere Chantry, and help him learn what happened there. The place didn't appear to be a normal physical space. Crossing some thresholds caused Bea and Janina pain and fear. Janina spotted a man, likely a servant of the Simishi, observing them, and as instructed by Edwin, killed him, but felt immense guilt for having done it. Bea and Joachim explored the ruins, making their way through spaces that didn't quite make sense to their senses. Bea, with her supernatural insight, felt revulsion towards the whole place, but she was also able to see some of what befell Clan Tremere: bombs, fire, and a tall inhuman-looking figure walking inside the chantry. On their way back to Hotel Bristol, they heard a radio announcement about a missing person, Beatrice Woźniak, searched for by her husband. Bea, who doesn't remember her mortal life, was shocked to hear herself mentioned on the radio and didn't know how to process this information. But Janina was intrigued and hoped Bea would follow up on the announcement and learn more about who she was before her embrace. Back at the hotel, they encountered anxious and confused Nastia. Bea again saw a vision of darkness reaching for and inside the young Bruja. Reassured by the coterie, Nastia revealed that sometimes she felt not quite like herself, but couldn't identify the cause of this feeling. The coterie spent some time at the Elysium, where they witnessed the prince rejecting the advances of the Toreador Primogen. They also spent time with their friends, particularly Daniel and Nastia, but also Dominic, the ballet dancer, who showed them his dance routine, danced to the new music composed and played by his Toreador friend Diana. Their beautiful performance was filled with sadness and pain, but during its course, Nastia and Janina held hands, clearly growing closer together. After the performance, Bea and Janina returned to the Elysium with Nastia. On the way, Bea had a vision of blood covering the walls of the hotel. They tried to tell the Bruja hound Elka that something dangerous was going to happen soon. She looked concerned, but not surprised. Before anyone could do anything, the Elysium was attacked by the Sabbat. Bea rushed to help the Ventru Cornelia, and Nastia got seriously hurt in the process. The coterie eventually got out of the Elysium and were met by the sheriff, who told them to go make sure his lover Dominic and his child Diana were safe. Bea and Janina went to look for them, but only found Diana, who was being tortured by Arek, a gangrel who in the past betrayed Bea's former coterie. With the help of Abelard, the sire of Dominic and Mara, they managed to put Arek in torpor. Using her gifts, Bea learned that Dominic was taken by the bodyguard they previously saw at the house of the Zimishi. Camarilla withstood the attack, but 3 of their kindred were killed in the process. The Bruja Hound, Elka, the Toreador, Fabian, and Leonard, the Malkavian whom the coterie previously saved. The following night, Bea reconnected with her sire, who was brought back to Hotel Bristol by the Malkavian Primogen. In a conversation with the Ventru Primogen, Malkavian Primogen denied ever sharing with Bea information about the terrifying presence she encountered in the sewers of the city. They then spoke to Bea in private and reminded her that the presence shouldn't be a problem unless someone goes looking for it. They also told her that there was wisdom in not always sharing all the information her supernatural insight granted to her. Janina spoke to the Bruja Primogen and warned him that Bea's vision indicated that Sabbat was especially interested in him and Nastia. He expressed a concern for Nastia and willingness to speak to Bea to get more details. He also told Janina that he saved some bodies of mortals who died in the attack, so that she could work on preserving blood from their bodies, establishing a blood bank for the Warsaw kindred. Later in the night, the Camarilla court gathered. Bruno, a Malkavian who sired multiple kindred during the war, has again embraced people without permission during the Sabbat attack, all in an attempt to save them. Despite protests from the Toreador Primogen and Isidore, the leader of the Anarchs, he was sentenced to death and executed. The coterie accompanied him up to the terrace where he was left for the sunrise, and was left distraught by his death. This is where we left our story before the summer break, but it is definitely not the end. The Ruins of Warsaw will be back in September to continue the journey of Bea and Janina.